U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to obliterate Iran's energy facilities if a deal is not reached shortly. He also said the U.S. is in talks with Iran's parliamentary speaker, but Tehran continues to deny that negotiations are taking place. President Lee Jae-myung addressed energy supply disruptions in a cabinet meeting this morning and called for bolder measures, even raising the possibility of an emergency economic decree. The United Nations has passed a resolution on human rights in North Korea, urging better treatment for those living under the regime and calling for inter-Korean dialogue. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that he will obliterate Iranian energy infrastructure if a deal to end the conflict isn't reached soon. However, Iran has called U.S.-led proposals unreasonable. Our Park Go-nu starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump issued another threat to Iran on Monday, saying its energy facilities would be obliterated if a deal isn't reached shortly and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately reopened. Writing on social media, Trump added that great progress had been made with a new and more reasonable regime, and that attacks on infrastructure would be in retaliation for nearly 50 years of Iranian attacks on U.S. soldiers. Trump said infrastructure, including desalination plants, which he said the U.S. had purposely not yet touched, could also be targeted. The White House stressed that Iran should not pass up the opportunity to make a deal as the clock ticks down on Trump's April 6 deadline.
Trump issued a 10-day pause to postpone planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. This remains a truly once-in-a-generation opportunity for the regime to make a good deal with the United States.
Trump also said on Monday the U.S. is in talks with Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf, though Tehran later denied that such negotiations with Washington are taking place.
The materials that have been conveyed to us under various titles, such as the 15-point plan, mainly include very excessive, unrealistic, and unreasonable demands. The meeting that Pakistan held with its neighboring countries is a framework that they established by themselves. We did not participate in this framework.
However, the Oval Office said talks are continuing and progressing well, adding that what's being said publicly is very different from what's being communicated privately behind the scenes. It also noted that 20 additional oil tankers are set to pass through the Strait of Hormuz in the coming days as a result of talks with Iran. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Iran is moving to impose tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, raising fresh concerns over global energy flows and maritime security. Now this comes as Iran and Hezbollah launch a coordinated strike on Israel's Haifa, with a missile hitting a key refinery. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Iran is taking steps that could significantly reshape control over one of the world's most critical energy routes as tensions across the Middle East continue to rise. According to reports on the country's state media on Monday, a parliamentary commission has approved a plan to impose tolls on vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The proposal includes a payment system using the Iranian rial and broader financial measures aimed at reinforcing what Tehran calls its sovereign authority over the waterway. The plan also envisions coordination with Oman, which shares control of the narrow passage connecting the Persian Gulf to major global shipping lanes. But the proposal is already drawing concern. It includes provisions to ban U.S. and Israeli vessels from transiting the strait, along with measures intended to counter international sanctions on Iran. Analysts warn such moves could escalate tensions further and raise serious legal and security concerns for the global maritime community. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital energy choke point, with about 1/5 of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passing through it under normal conditions. Experts say introducing tolls, combined with new restrictions on certain vessels, could further disrupt already fragile energy flows and increase volatility in global oil and gas prices. Meanwhile, tensions are spilling over into direct military action. Iran and the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah have carried out a coordinated attack on Israel's industrial city of Haifa. Israeli media said a missile struck a distillation tank at a refinery operated by the Bazan Group on Monday. The company says there are no casualties and that operations remain unaffected. Both Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Hezbollah were reportedly involved in targeting Haifa. though it remains unclear which group launched the missile that hit the refinery. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has called for bolder measures to address potential energy supply disruptions stemming from the Middle East conflict, and he even raised the possibility of using an emergency presidential decree. Presiding over a cabinet meeting this morning, Lee said that if legal or regulatory barriers slow the government response, he would consider invoking the Presidential Emergency Financial and Economic Order. Under South Korean law, the order allows the president to take immediate action with the force of law in the event of a serious economic crisis. It was last invoked in 1993 when the government introduced a real-name financial transaction system. The Korean won has weakened further against the US dollar as fears grow over the economic impact of conflict in the Middle East. The Korean won extended a 5-day spiral during trading on Tuesday, surpassing 1,525 per dollar and marking the lowest intraday level since the March 2009 global financial crisis. This follows a warning from U.S. President Donald Trump that the United States could target Iranian power plants and energy facilities if a deal to end the month-long conflict isn't reached. Oil prices have continued to rise, with WTI crude jumping over 3% to above $102 per barrel, the highest closing basis level since 2022. The weakening of the Korean won is attributed to money flowing into the traditional safe haven dollar during times of heightened uncertainty. At the National Assembly, a plenary session will be held later this afternoon to pass around 60 bills and fill 4 vacant committee chair positions. Key items on the agenda include livelihood and economic measures, including foreign exchange stability bills, which propose amendments to the tax law to address the weak Korean won. The proposed amendments would introduce a system to encourage funds invested overseas to flow back into the country. Lawmakers are to vote on the replacement for 4 standing committee chairs, including the Judiciary Committee chair, who are stepping down ahead of local election bids. The National Assembly may also take up a revision to designate May 1st, Labor Day, as an official public holiday. "50 countries have backed a joint resolution on North Korea's human rights, which was adopted on Monday in Geneva local time. It calls for improvement of the treatment of North Koreans within the regime, as well as inter-Korean dialogue. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
The United Nations Human Rights Council has adopted a resolution on North Korea's human rights situation Monday in Geneva. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, South Korea was among some 50 countries co-sponsoring the document, which passed by consensus. The resolution points out systematic, widespread and grave human rights violations inside the North, including torture and sexual violence across the prison and detention system, the persecution of women and girls, and the expanding use of digital surveillance and the death penalty to suppress dissent. It calls on Pyongyang to close all political prison camps and end public executions. It also warns that forced labour, including the deployment of workers abroad, may constitute enslavement under international criminal law. The resolution further calls for the immediate repatriation of adoptees, including South Korean and Japanese nationals, and the resumption of reunions for families separated by the Korean War. At the same time, the resolution recognised that Pyongyang participated in the UN's Universal Periodic Review and complied with certain human rights obligations. The document also stressed the importance of engagement, including inter-Korean dialogue, as a means of improving human rights inside the North. Seoul has highlighted these points in line with the Lee Jae-myung government's push to re-engage with Pyongyang. South Korea has been a consistent co-sponsor of the annual resolution on North Korea's human rights from 2008 through 2018. It set out, during the Moon Jae-in administration, a period of inter-Korean engagement before rejoining under the previous administration in 2023. The Lee government has upheld this position while maintaining its policy of peaceful coexistence with the North, according to Unification Minister Chung Dong-hyung on Monday. The Human Rights Council has passed a North Korea-specific resolution every year since 2003. Pyongyang has consistently rejected the measures, calling them politically motivated. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Hanwha Defense USA and Hanwha Philly Shipyard have won their first U.S. Navy subcontract, a significant step into the U.S. defense market. The award is part of the Navy's next-generation logistics ship program, with Hanwha joining as a subcontractor to VARD Marine U.S. Under the deal, Hanwha will take part in early-stage development, including market surveys, concept design, and production planning. The company has invested over $200 million into the Philadelphia shipyard since late 2024 to expand its capabilities. The contract also includes options for additional design work and specialized studies as the program advances. Ahead of the April 3rd anniversary of the start of a state crackdown, President Lee Jae-myung vowed to prevent state violence in a town hall meeting he held on the country's southern island of Jeju. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Institutionalizing measures to prevent state violence. That was President Lee Jae-myung on Monday as he spoke with Jeju Islanders at a town hall meeting on the southern island. Calling the April 3rd incident a starting point for mass state violence, he yet again vowed to abolish the statute of limitations for criminal and civil cases related to instances of this.
나치 전범처럼 죽을 때까지 반드시 책임을 묻는다. 평생 쫓아다니면서 추적, 조사, 수사하고 처벌한다. 그래서 좀 두려워하게 해야 된다. 역사와 국민과 국가에.
The president revisited the need to ensure that proper compensation is made to victims, hinting that related property inherited by the descendants of those who committed state violence will be taken back. He vowed to once again push for legislation to remove the time limitation rule, which was led by the then main opposition Democratic Party in 2024, but was vetoed by the previous administration.
이제 대통령이 됐고 국회가 또 다수의석이 이제는 가능하겠죠.
The April 3rd massacre refers to an incident where thousands of islanders were killed between 1947 and 1954 due to an extended government crackdown on protests against a separate general election in the South amid the Cold War era. On the recent energy crisis due to the Middle East war, he also called for the need to swiftly switch to renewable energy, noting Jeju's great potential for this.
지금 전 세계적으로 에너지 문제 때문에 난리가 났잖아요. 사실 저도 잠이 잘 안 올 정도로 사실은 심각한 상황입니다. 그런데 대한민국은 전체적으로 재생에너지로 정말 신속하게 전환해야 됩니다. 그리고 가장 빨리 현실적인 성과를 낼 수 있는 데 전 제주도가 아닐까.
Some asked the government to provide more incentives for renewables.
I ask you to significantly lower grid use fees for energy generators and buyers in the local substation market.
On top of that, South Korea plans to nurture the island as one of the key hubs for tourism, using its convention center and stadium as K-pop concert halls that can accommodate thousands of fans. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Mega hit boy band BTS have captured the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 with their latest song, Swim. Billboard's confirmation on Monday marks the 7th time the group have topped the chart. BTS first reached #1 with Dynamite 6 years ago. They're now only the 5th artist to achieve 7 #1 hits. BTS, through their agency, said they're deeply grateful to their fans for helping them achieve the record with their long-awaited album, adding that they hope the song Swim has brought listeners a sense of comfort and encouragement. BTS also topped the Billboard 200 chart with their latest album, Arirang. There is a special exhibition at Kansong Art Museum, Daegu, where artificial intelligence has been integrated with the traditional Korean art piece, Portrait of a Beauty. What would this piece look like in the styles of Western masters like Monet and Rembrandt? Our Ian Jin has the story.
A research team from the Daegu Gyeongbok Institute of Science and Technology has used AI to reinterpret Korean traditional art through the eyes of Western masters. The voluminous braided hair and enigmatic gaze of Shin Yun-bok's Portrait of a Beauty is often dubbed the Mona Lisa of Joseon. But in this variant of the work, the jagged lines and use of muted colors closely resemble the style of Western master Egon Schiele. And in this edition, a sense of three-dimensionality is added, showing Rembrandt's style of dramatic use of light and shadow.
빛 The light and shadow compositions became significantly more dynamic. It became more three-dimensional, and it was interesting to see how the atmosphere shifts accordingly.
An exhibition at Kansong Art Museum Daegu also showcases the flip side, where Western masterpieces are converted into the style of Shinyeonbok. Also popular at the exhibition is an interactive booth that transforms visitors' faces into art, and a moving AI version of Portrait of a Beauty. While there were concerns regarding the modification of the original work, the focus was placed on providing a new and enjoyable artistic perspective.
I believe art should always present something new to the audience. If we can provide a new experience for visitors without damaging the original work, I thought it was a challenge worth taking.
This exhibition will run until May 31st. And following this special exhibition, Kansong Art Museum Daegu plans to open a dedicated hall for Portrait of a Beauty in July. 이은진, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Cuba has received a sanctioned Russian oil tanker carrying approximately 730,000 barrels of crude, the first fuel delivery to reach the island this year under a U.S. oil blockade. Russia's transport ministry on Monday confirmed the vessel docked at the port of Matanzas. Experts say the shipment could produce roughly 180,000 barrels of diesel, enough to meet Cuba's daily demand for 9 to 10 days. President Trump told reporters on Sunday he had, quote, no problem with the delivery, though the White House said there has been no firm change in U.S. sanctions policy and that future decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis. Cuba has endured island-wide blackouts since the United States cut off Venezuela's oil exports to Havana in January. President Trump had threatened tariffs on any country supplying Cuba with crude oil, but reversed course Sunday, expressing sympathy for the Cuban people. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell told Harvard students on Monday that the Fed will hold interest rates steady and watch how the Iran war reshapes the U.S. economy before making any move. Speaking on campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Powell acknowledged that the Fed now faces a direct conflict between its two core mandates of keeping prices stable while protecting jobs as the Iran war enters its fifth week and national gasoline prices climb to an average of $4 a gallon. Brent crude traded at $111 a barrel on Monday, and West Texas Intermediate rose to $102. Markets had priced in a rate hike last week, but after Powell's remarks, those expectations disappeared. The Fed left its benchmark rate unchanged at 3.5 to 3.75% earlier this month. Powell's term ends on May 15th, with Trump nominee Kevin Warsh set to succeed him. Spain's defense ministry announced on Monday that Madrid had closed its airspace to all U.S. military aircraft involved in the Iran war. Madrid had already been refusing the use of jointly operated bases. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has called the U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran reckless and illegal. President Trump has threatened to cut trade with Spain over the dispute. The closure forces U.S. military aircraft to reroute around the NATO member state on missions to the Middle East. Israel's parliament passed a law on Monday making the death penalty the default sentence for Palestinians convicted of deadly attacks. The law requires execution by hanging within 90 days of sentencing. 62 of the 120 Knesset members backed the bill. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu voted in favor after pushing to soften its terms. Israeli rights groups filed an appeal with the country's Supreme Court the same day. Britain, France, Germany, and Italy condemned the law as discriminatory. Palestinian militant groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad immediately called for revenge attacks. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Yesterday's welcome rain helped to ease the dryness and wash away the dust in the air. And most of the rain should taper off by this morning, but showers along the East Coast could linger into the afternoon with 5 to 20 millimeters expected there. However, the concern today is strong winds. Strong wind advisories are in place for the east coast of Gyeongsang-Pukto province, as well as Busan, Ulsan, and parts of Jeju Island. And this afternoon will be as warm or just slightly lower than yesterday, with Seoul getting up to 19 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Busan will be getting up to 18 degrees. But some of the East Coast regions, including Gangneung and Pohang, will notice the highs going up to only the low teens. And once the rain moves out, skies will turn partly cloudy through the day in most parts of Korea. Temperatures will be lower than the last few days, but will still be above norms, with another round of rain expected nationwide this weekend.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.